3 days before her wedding, Margaret overheard the Duke tell his cousin he only tolerated her for her father's sake. Her father was dying. He believed she had found happiness. She had a fortnight to decide. Tell him the truth and break his heart, or marry a man who could not bear the sight of her. Wexley Hall, Berkshire, the 3rd week of October 1816. The wedding was to be in a fortnight. The bride was 24, the groom was 33, and the only person in the house who believed the match a love match was the head gardener, who believed it because his wife had told him to. Margaret Lisle arrived at Wexley Hall on a Tuesday afternoon with 2 trunks, a maid named Bess and her mother's pearl earrings in their small leather box at the bottom of her reticule. She had not opened the box since her father had pressed it into her hand at Lisle Court 3 days before. "Your mother wore them to her wedding," Sir Edmund had said, and then, because he was a man who could not finish a sentimental sentence in front of his daughter, "Try not to lose them on the road." She had not lost them on the road. She had stood on the gravel sweep before the great pale front of Wexley Hall and put her hand to her reticule to be certain the small weight was still there. The box was there. The house was there. The Duke was there, on the steps in dark grey with his hat in his hand, and an expression so composed it might have been carved into him. "Miss Lisle," he bowed, he did not smile. "I hope your journey was uneventful." "Entirely uneventful, Your Grace." "Then it was a better journey than mine usually is." He offered no further pleasantry. He turned to the housekeeper who was waiting in the hall behind him and said, "Mrs. Pine will show you to your rooms. We dine at 7. That was the welcome. Margaret followed Mrs. Pine up the great staircase and did not look back at him. In her chamber, she sat on the window seat for a long time and considered what she had agreed to. She had agreed because her father had asked her, in a voice that had grown thinner over the summer, whether she would honour the arrangement he and the late Duke had made over brandy in a library 9 years ago. Sir Edmund had not pressed. He had only said, "I would like to see you settled, Margaret. I would like to know it." She had said yes. She had said yes because her father's hand was thinner than it had been at Easter, and because the physician from London had come and gone and would not promise the winter, and because she had reasoned that a respectable husband one did not love was a smaller grief than a father one had refused to comfort. She was not a romantic. She had been raised by a man who treated sentiment as a small, unreliable dog one kept out of the dining room. She did not expect Wexley to love her. She had hoped only that he might be civil. He was civil. He was civil at dinner, where he asked her 3 questions about the road and 1 about her father's health. He was civil in the drawing-room afterwards, where his mother, a thin, alert woman with a black lace cap, asked Margaret a great many more questions, and the Duke answered most of them on her behalf. He was civil the following morning at breakfast, where he read his correspondence and apologized twice for reading it. That evening, before dinner, Margaret sat at the dressing-table, and her own maid Bess threaded the slender gold wires through her ears with the small, careful tug Margaret had known since girlhood. The pearls hung steady. Bess stepped back to look at her. "They suit, miss." "They were my mother's." "I know it, miss." Margaret touched the left one. It swung very slightly against her finger. By Friday she had understood the rhythm of the house. The Duke rose early. He rode out before breakfast. He returned, ate without speaking, and disappeared into the estate office until 2. He emerged for a late luncheon, was civil, and disappeared again. He dined with his mother and his fiancée and his cousin Mr. Crawford, who had arrived on Thursday, and who laughed at his own jokes louder than anyone else. "You are quiet, Miss Lisle," the Dowager Duchess observed on Saturday evening. "Are we wearing you out?" "Not at all, ma'am. I am only listening." "That is a dangerous habit in this house." The Dowager said it lightly, but her eyes did not lighten. Margaret did not pursue it. She had learned in a week that the women of Wexley Hall, the Duchess, the housekeeper, even the lady's maid who unpinned her hair at night, spoke a language in which the meaning sat beneath the words like a stone in a river. One did not lift it out. One stepped carefully around it. She also understood by Saturday that the Duke had not once looked at her for longer than was strictly required by good manners. He had not touched her hand except to hand her down from a carriage. He had not used her Christian name. She did not particularly mind. She had not come here to be looked at. She had come because her father wished it. What she did not know on Saturday evening was the conversation she would overhear on Sunday afternoon. It was raining. It had rained since Friday night, a slow, patient rain that had turned the gravel sweep to a dull mirror and kept the house indoors. Margaret had walked the long gallery twice and read in the morning room, and at last decided to go down to the library, which she had been told held a fine collection of botanical engravings. The library at Wexley Hall lay at the end of the east corridor. It had 2 doors. The principal door opened on the corridor itself. The second, smaller door, set into a recess behind a pair of bookcases, gave on to the music room, where Margaret had spent the better part of the morning with a folio of old songs. She had not known the 2 rooms were connected. She discovered it now as she rose from the music room sofa, because she heard a voice she recognized on the far side of the bookcase. "Fair Margaret Lisle is hardly the bride one would have invented for you, cousin." Mr. Crawford's voice, lazy, amused. "A baronet's daughter, tolerable looks, tolerable fortune. One can see father's hand in it, of course. He liked her father, but I confess I expected better of you. The Duke of Wexley might have had any woman in 3 counties." Margaret stopped. She had crossed half the music room. The connecting door was a foot ajar, pulled to but not latched, the way doors are left by servants who have brought in a tray and gone out again without thinking. She did not push it. She did not retreat. She found that she could not. A pause. The sound of a glass being set down on wood. "You have a great deal to say, Crawford, for a man whose own prospects rest entirely on my failure to produce a son. Oh, come, don't be priggish. I'm only saying, between us, Wexley, one might at least have liked her, one might at least have wished to be in the room with her. I watched you at dinner last night. You looked as though you were waiting for a tooth to be drawn." Another pause. Margaret did not breathe. "What would you have me say, Crawford?" "Say you adore her. Say she is the light of your life. Lie, man, the way the rest of us lie. It is a wedding, not a court of law." "I have no intention of lying to you about Miss Lisle." "Then what is the truth?" The Duke's voice, when it came, was perfectly level. It was the voice of a man cutting a thread. "The truth, since you insist on it, is that I only tolerate her for her father's sake. There, now leave the subject." Margaret did not move. She heard Mr. Crawford laugh, a short, surprised laugh, and say, "Good God, Wexley, that is bleak. You wanted the truth." "I wanted to tease you." Then I should not have answered. There was the sound of a chair pushed back. Margaret turned, lifted her skirts an inch above the carpet, and walked back across the music room without making any sound at all. She did not run. She had been raised not to run in a house. She gained the corridor by the music room door, climbed the stairs, entered her chamber, and closed her own door behind her. She sat down on the edge of her bed. She did not weep. She had not wept since her mother's funeral when she was 11, and she did not now. She put her hand, very carefully, to her left ear, and felt the cool, smooth weight of the pearl, and was surprised to find that her fingers were perfectly steady. She thought, "He has said it out loud to another man in his own house. He does not even know he has said it." She thought, with a clarity that arrived almost before the pain, "I cannot marry him." She thought, with the second clarity, "I cannot tell my father." Her father was dying. The physician had said autumn, perhaps Christmas, no longer. Her father had given her her mother's earrings and told her not to lose them on the road. Her father had said, in the front hall of Lisle Court, with his hand on her sleeve, "I would like to know you are settled." She could not arrive home in a fortnight with no husband and no explanation. She could not tell him the Duke of Wexley had said, in his own library, that he tolerated her. Sir Edmund would understand. That was the trouble. Sir Edmund would understand exactly, and he would die with that understanding, and Margaret would not permit it. She stood. She crossed to her writing desk. She drew out a sheet of paper and dipped the pen, and then she put the pen down again because she did not know what to write. She would write nothing. She would say nothing. She would leave. She rang for Bess. "Pack the small trunk," Margaret said when the maid came. "Only the small one, the plain things. Leave the silks." Bess, who had been with Margaret since she was 16, and who had a face built for not asking questions, did not ask. She said, "When do we go, miss?" "Before dawn. Can you have the trap brought round without rousing the house?" "Jenkins will do it for me if I ask him." "Ask him." Bess hesitated at the door. She was a thin, red-haired woman of 30 with a flat, sensible mouth. "Miss, is there to be a letter?" "No." "None at all, miss." "None at all." Bess nodded once and went. Margaret sat at the dressing table. She slid the wire from her left ear, then from her right, and laid the pearls on the polished walnut in front of her. They sat there, 2 small moons. She thought, "I will not take them out of his house. He shall not say I took anything out of his house." She thought, "My father gave me these." She held the second thought for a long time. She put her hand over the pearls, then she lifted her hand again. She did not put them back in. She did not put them in the box, either. She left them where they lay, 2 pale points on the dark wood, in plain sight of the door. She slept 3 hours. She rose before the maids. She wore her plainest travelling dress and her plainest cloak, and she went down the back stair with Bess at 5 in the morning, with the small trunk between them, and Jenkins had the trap at the kitchen gate as Bess had promised. The rain had stopped. The gravel was dark and the sky was the colour of pewter. "To the post road, miss," said Jenkins. "To the post road." He clicked his tongue. The pony moved off. Margaret did not look back at the great pale front of Wexley Hall. She did not look back at the lit window of the housekeeper's room. She did not look back at all. She had her father's gift still, in a sense. She had only left the pearls. The Duke of Wexley rode out at 7, as he did every morning, and returned at 8:30 to be told by Mrs. Pine, in a voice carefully drained of inflection, that Miss Lyle had departed before dawn. "Departed?" "Yes, Your Grace." "For where?" "She did not say, Your Grace. She left no letter." He stood in the front hall in his riding coat with reins still on his shoulders, and said nothing for some time. Mrs. Pine, who was a woman of 60 and had served his father and his grandfather, waited. "Her maid?" "Gone with her, Your Grace." "The trap?" "Returned by Jenkins half an hour ago. He took them to the Bell at Hungerford to meet the mail." "Hungerford?" The Duke's hand closed on the riding crop he had not yet put down. "Thank you, Mrs. Pine." "Your Grace." She did not move. "Mrs. Pine." "Yes, Your Grace." "Was there nothing left in her room?" Mrs. Pine paused. She had clearly been waiting to be asked. "Her trunks, Your Grace, 3 of them, all her silks, and the pearl earrings she came in, sir, on the dressing table." The Duke did not move. He looked for a moment like a man who had been struck without warning and had not yet decided whether to fall. "Thank you, Mrs. Pine." He went up the stair 2 at a time, which he had not done in 15 years. He stood in the doorway of her chamber. The bed had been made, Bess's last small courtesy. The trunks were ranged against the wall. The dressing table was bare except for the 2 pearls and a folded square of muslin she had used to polish them. He crossed to the table and looked down. The earrings sat exactly as she had left them. They had been placed, he understood at once, where the door would frame them when it opened. He did not pick them up. He thought in order, "She has gone, she has left her father's pearls, she knew I would come into this room." He thought, after a longer pause, the thought he had been refusing for nearly a month. "I have done something I do not understand yet, and I shall understand it shortly, and it shall be the worst thing I have ever heard about myself." He went down to the breakfast room. His cousin Crawford was at the table with a plate of kidneys and the newspaper. "You are late, Wexley. Is the bride down?" "The bride is gone." Crawford lowered the paper. "Gone." "Before dawn, without a word." Crawford was silent for a long moment. He was not a quick man, but he was not a stupid one. His face changed by degrees. "Wexley," he said, "what did she hear?" The Duke, who had not until that moment in his life felt the full weight of his own name, sat down across from his cousin and said very quietly, "Everything you and I said in the library on Sunday afternoon. The music-room door was open behind the bookcase. I did not think of it. I have not thought of it in years." Crawford set down his fork. "Oh, Christ," he said. "Oh, Wexley." The mail coach from Hungerford to Reading was unpleasant, and the post-chaise from Reading to Lisle Court was worse, but the distance from Wexley Hall to her father's house was not great, as the country measures things, and Margaret was set down at her own gate in the late afternoon of the day she had left, with mud on her hem and her hair very nearly out of its pins, and a story in her mouth she had been rehearsing since Reading. The story was that the Duke had been called urgently to London on matters of estate business, that the wedding was postponed by a fortnight, perhaps a month, that she had come home to nurse her father in the interval, because there was no reason to remain at Wexley Hall without him. The story was thin. It would not survive a week. It would survive, she hoped, until Christmas, which was, the physician had told her in August, very nearly the most she could ask for her father. She would think about the rest later. She would think about it when there was no longer anyone in the house she had to lie to. Sir Edmund Lisle was in the morning-room, in a chair pulled near the fire with a rug over his knees and his old terrier asleep on his foot. He had been 71 in September. He looked older than that now, but his eyes, pale grey, very keen, very much his daughter's, were undimmed. He looked at her in the doorway in her muddy cloak and did not stand. He did not need to. "Margaret." "Papa." "You did not write to say you were coming." "There was no time. The Duke was called away. I came home until matters are arranged." He held out his hand. She came and took it. His fingers were thinner than they had been 3 weeks ago. "You look well enough." "I am well, Papa." "And the wedding." Postponed, not cancelled. He sends his apologies. Sir Edmund regarded her for a long moment. He did not, she saw, believe her. He did not, she also saw, intend to press her. Sit down, child, you are dripping on the rug. She sat. And how did you find Wexley? He asked. Civil cold. She hesitated, and then, because honesty in small things was the only way she would survive lying in large. I do not think we shall be a love match, Papa. Few people are. You and Mama were. Your mother was an exception to every general rule I ever framed. Sir Edmund coughed, a dry, small cough that he had developed in July, and which the physician had said meant nothing, and which Margaret knew meant everything. Wexley is not a bad man, Margaret. I have known his family 30 years. I'm sure he is not, Papa. You do not have to love him today. You only have to be civil to him today. Yes, Papa. He looked at her with the eyes that had always seen too much. You are not wearing your mother's pearls. Margaret had prepared for this. She had prepared for it on the reading road. She put her hand to her ear very calmly and said, I left them in their box. I did not want to risk them on the journey. Sensible. Yes. Margaret. Yes, Papa. Look at me. She looked. If something has occurred, I should prefer to know it. Nothing has occurred, Papa. The wedding is postponed. I am tired. May I have tea? He held her gaze for the space of 2 breaths. Then he released her hand and said, Ring for Mrs. Hill, my dear, and tell her to put brandy in mine. She rose and rang and turned her face to the bell-pull so that he would not see what was in it. That night, after her father had been helped to bed and the house had gone quiet, Margaret sat at her writing desk in her childhood bedroom and faced the question she had been outrunning since dawn. What was she to do? She could not stay engaged. The Duke would, sooner or later, in a week, in a month, write to her father or arrive in person, and the truth would come out, and her father's heart would not bear it. She had to end the engagement herself, and end it in writing, and end it in such a way that her father believed the dissolution had been mutual and dignified, and contained no insult to her name. She would write then to the Duke. She would write to him tomorrow. She drew out a sheet. She dipped the pen. She wrote, Your Grace. She stopped. She tried again on a fresh sheet. Your Grace, I write to release you. She stopped. Your Grace, you cannot have failed to understand. She stopped. She sat for an hour with 3 half-begun letters in front of her, and at the end of the hour she swept them into the grate and watched the paper curl. She could not do it tonight. Her hands were not steady enough, and her sentences were not cold enough, and she was not yet sure whether what she would write would be a release or an accusation. She would do it tomorrow. She undressed. She unpinned her hair. She lay down in the bed she had slept in since she was 7 years old, and she thought against her will of the dressing table at Wexley Hall and the 2 small pearls on dark wood, and she wondered who would put them away, and whether they would be put away with care. She slept. She did not write the letter the next day. She did not write it because at breakfast her father came down on his stick. He had not come down on his stick in a fortnight, and said with his old dry warmth, I find I am better this morning, Margaret. We shall walk in the garden if you will give me your arm. She gave him her arm. They walked very slowly the length of the south terrace, and her father leaned more heavily on her than he ever had in her life, and he stopped twice to catch his breath, and at the end he said, There, that was an achievement. We are not finished yet, you and I. She did not write the letter that day. She did not write it the next either, because her father wanted to be read to, and asked for Cowper, and made small dry observations on the verses that made her laugh against her will, and because she could not, with her father in the next chair, sit down at the writing desk and end her engagement to the man her father most wanted her settled with. She did not write it on the 3rd day because, on the 3rd day the letter arrived from him. It was brought up on the silver tray with the Morning Post. Mrs. Hill set the tray on the sideboard, and Margaret recognized the seal before she had taken her seat, the Wexley arms, pressed in dark red wax. She watched her hand take the letter from the tray as though it belonged to another woman. Sir Edmund, who was at his end of the table with his coffee and the Morning Post, looked up. From Wexley? Yes, Papa. Read it, Margaret. She did not wish to read it in his presence. She did not wish to read it at all. She broke the seal. The hand was firm, sloping, unhurried. It had been written by a man who had taken pains with each line. Oh, Miss Lyle, Kersin Martsita, I shall not insult you by pretending to misunderstand your departure. I know what you heard, and I know what was said, and I know that you went without writing because there was nothing I could have written in reply that you would have believed. Kersin Martsita, I make no defense in this letter. A defense offered in writing from a man who has already injured you would be a second injury. I ask only that you read what follows and judge of it as you would judge of anything else. Kersin Marzita. My aunt, Mrs. Carruthers, keeps a small house at Marlborough. You may recall my mother mentioned her at dinner. She has consented to receive me on Friday afternoon, and to receive any visitor I name, and to ask no questions. I shall be at her house from 1 o'clock until 5. If you can be spared, I beg you will come with your maid, and call upon her in the ordinary way. She will give us a quarter of an hour in the small parlour, and remain within hearing. If you cannot come or do not wish to come, I shall return to Berkshire on Monday morning, and write to your father a letter releasing you from our engagement, in any terms you direct. Kersin Marzita. Whatever you decide, the pearls are safe. They are in the same drawer where you used to keep them. I have not touched them. Kersin Marzita. Light Wexley. Margaret read it twice. She folded it. She placed it under the edge of her plate. Well, said Sir Edmund. He has been delayed in London, Margaret said. He hopes to call here Friday or Saturday. Good. Yes, Papa. Are you eating your egg, child, or only looking at it? I am eating it, Papa. She ate her egg. She thought, he has not lied for himself in that letter. He has not asked me to forgive him. He has not even said the word forgive. She thought, he has set the date, and he has named the place, and he has put the choice in my hand, and he has put it in his aunt's house, so that I shall not be observed in a public room. She thought with a small and unwelcome stab, that is not what I expected of him. She told her father on Friday morning that she had been asked by Mrs. Pine to call upon the housekeeper's niece in Marlborough, a small errand, a parcel from Wexley to be collected, and that she would take Bess and the carriage and be home by dinner. Sir Edmund, who had not been told that the Wexley housekeeper had a niece in Marlborough, did not press the point. He had not pressed any point in 3 days. He only said, "Take a rug. The afternoon will turn." The Lisle carriage set Margaret and Bess down before a narrow stone-fronted house on the upper end of the High Street at 2:30 on a cold, dry Friday. The brass plate by the door read, Mrs. Carruthers. A maid took her card. Margaret was shown, with Bess 2 steps behind her, into a small front parlour where a thin, grey-haired woman in a black gown rose from her chair by the fire. "Miss Lisle, I am Henrietta Carruthers. My nephew has spoken of you. Please sit down." Margaret sat. Bess took her place by the window. "You will take tea," said Mrs. Carruthers. It was not a question. "I shall fetch my nephew in a moment. He is in the back parlour. I have told him he may have a quarter of an hour. I shall be at my needle in this chair, and your young woman shall be at the window, and the door shall stand open. I make no apology for these arrangements, my dear. I have a fondness for your family, and a longer one for my nephew, and I do not propose to allow either of you to be foolish on my premises. Ma'am, drink your tea, Miss Lisle. You look very pale." Margaret drank her tea. Mrs. Carruthers went out. A moment later the Duke came in. He had been at the window of another room. She knew it by the cold on his coat. He had not been sitting. He stopped just inside the door, and for a moment he did not speak, and Margaret understood that he had not, until that moment, been certain she would come. "Miss Lisle." "Your Grace." "Thank you for coming. You were not obliged." "I am aware." He glanced once at Bess at the window, once at the open door behind him, and seemed satisfied. He did not approach her. He stopped at the distance of a drawing-room introduction, not of a man addressing the woman he had been engaged to marry. "Will you take anything more?" "No, thank you." "Then I shall not." He drew a breath. "Miss Lisle, I shall not waste your afternoon. I owe you an account of what you heard. May I give it?" "You may. You heard me say that I tolerated you for your father's sake." "I did." "It was the cruelest sentence I have ever spoken about anyone, and I spoke it to my cousin Crawford, because he had been mocking the match for 2 days, and because I knew that one cruelty from me would close the subject faster than 10 denials. I said it to silence him. I did not say it because I believed it. I am ashamed to say I knew at the time that it would silence him. I am more ashamed to say I did not, until you were gone, recall that the music-room door at the back of the library was not properly shut. I had used those rooms together since I was a boy. I had ceased to think of the second door at all. That is a poor excuse. I do not offer it as one. I offer it only as the truth." He stopped. He did not turn his eyes from her. "That is what I said, and that is why I said it. It is not a defense. A man who speaks of his future wife as I spoke of you has injured her whether she hears it or not. I should not have said it of you to my cousin if I had been thinking of you. I was thinking of Crawford. That is the only thing I can offer in mitigation, and it is not enough. Margaret said very evenly, "No, it is not enough." I did not come here to argue that it was. She set her cup down. Her hand, she discovered, was less steady than she had thought. "Why did you come, then?" "To say what I have said, and to tell you that if you wish me to write to your father, releasing you in any words you choose, I shall do it tonight, from this house, and you shall read the letter before I send it." She looked at him. He was a tall man, and the room was small, and the afternoon light from the window was bad for him. She saw with surprise that he looked older than he had at Wexley Hall. There was a line at the corner of his mouth she did not remember. "Is that all you came to say?" "No." He paused. "But the rest is what I have no right to say, and I shall not say it without your permission." "You may say it." He drew a breath. "I cannot ask you to come back to Wexley Hall. I would not ask it. I do ask, if you can bear it, that you allow me, at some date you name, to call upon your father, not to renew the engagement, only to be presented as a man who has not insulted his daughter. He is unwell. I do not wish him to die believing that I held you in contempt. I held you in no such feeling. The contrary, in fact." There it was, the small admission. The contrary, in fact, in the voice of a man who did not yet trust himself to put the matter more strongly. Margaret found that she had folded her hands very tightly in her lap. "Your Grace," she said, "you are very careful in your sentences. I have learned this week to be careful with sentences. And you have asked me nothing about whether I shall release you. You have already released me, Miss Lyle. You left my house at dawn without a letter, and you left your mother's pearls on the dressing table where I should be certain to see them. I understood you. I shall not pretend otherwise. I came to tell you that I had heard you." She looked away from him. She looked at the small grate with its small fire. She thought, he came to tell me he had heard me, not to ask me to come back. She thought, this is the worst possible time for him to be a better man than I had taken him for. "My father," she said at last, "my father is dying." "I know." "He believes the wedding is postponed. He believes you have been called to London. He believes I have come home for an interval." "I know." "If you write to him releasing me, you will kill him." "I know that too." "Then what do you propose?" He hesitated. It was, she saw, the first hesitation he had permitted himself since she had come into the room. "I propose that we remain engaged in name before your father, until his condition is settled in one direction or the other. I propose that no announcement be made and no plans pressed. I propose that you remain at Lisle Court, and that I keep my distance. I propose, if you will allow it, to call once a fortnight briefly, so that he sees that I have not abandoned you. Afterwards, you shall be free of me. I shall write the release myself, in any terms you direct. I shall accept any consequence." Margaret was quiet for a long time. "You are asking me to lie to my father for you." "No, I am asking you to allow me to help you lie to your father for him. It is a distinction." He hesitated again. "I should not have phrased it that way." "Why not? It is the truth." "The truth, Miss Lyle, is what I appear to be discovering this week, as if for the first time." She almost laughed. She did not. The laugh would have come out of the wrong place. "Your Grace," she said, "I shall consider what you have proposed. I shall write to you at Wexley by tomorrow noon. You shall have my answer in writing. I should prefer not to see you again until I have written it." "You shall not see me until you summon me, you have my word." "Very well." She rose. He rose with her. At the door of the parlour she stopped. She did not turn round. "The pearls," she said. "They are in your dressing-table drawer. They are exactly where you left them, except that I moved them from the table into the drawer, with a square of muslin between my hand and them, so that the maids should not handle them. No one has touched them but me. They are unmarked." Margaret looked at the door. "Thank you," she said. She went out and made her brief proper farewell to Mrs. Carruthers in the front hall, and stepped up into the carriage with Bess at her heel, and the carriage took her down the high street and out onto the Lisle Road in the failing light. She did not weep on the road, and when she came into her father's room before dinner, he looked up from his book and said, "Did Mrs. Pine's niece send a civil message?" And she said, "Yes, Papa." She was very obliging. She lay awake until 2 in the morning. At 2 she rose and dressed in her wrapper, and went down to the writing desk in the morning room, and she lit a candle, and she wrote a letter, and the letter she wrote was not the letter she had set out to write. The letter Margaret wrote at 2 in the morning was 4 lines long. She read it 3 times, she sealed it. She gave it to the boy from the village in the morning. with a shilling, and instructions to put it directly into the hand of Mrs. Carruthers's maid in Marlborough for the gentleman who had called the day before. The letter read, Your Grace. Caesin Marzita. I accept your proposal as to my father. You may call at Lisle Court on Wednesday next in the afternoon for half an hour. I shall expect no more than that, and no less. Caesin Marzita. Mais Monsieur Lisle. She had written M. Lisle and not Margaret. She had written no more than that and no less. She had written nothing about forgiveness, because she had not forgiven him, and she had written nothing about the pearls, because she did not yet know what the pearls meant. She gave the boy the letter, and watched him ride out and went up to her father's room to read him the Morning Post. On Wednesday afternoon at 2:30, the Duke's carriage drew up at the gate of Lisle Court. He came in alone. He had a small posy of late autumn roses, 6, no more, which he presented to Margaret without ceremony in the hall, and which she received without ceremony and gave to Mrs. Hill to put in water. He sat with Sir Edmund for 40 minutes. Margaret was in the room for the whole of it. She did not contribute much to the conversation. Sir Edmund did most of the talking. He was animated in a way Margaret had not seen since August. He asked the Duke about the Berkshire roads and the harvest and the fortunes of an old acquaintance in the Lords, and the Duke answered everything with patience and small, precise civility. He did not lie. He did not say a single word about the wedding. He did not refer by look or phrase to the woman in the third chair. At one point Sir Edmund coughed, the dry small cough, and the Duke, without breaking the rhythm of his sentence, leaned forward and refilled her father's water glass and set it within reach of his hand. He did it as though he had been doing it for years. Margaret watched the Duke's hand on the glass. She did not know why she was watching it. She watched it. At the end of the 40 minutes the Duke rose, made his bow, said, Sir Edmund, I shall do myself the honour of calling again in a fortnight, if I may. And Sir Edmund said, You may, sir, you may. And the Duke turned to Margaret and said, Miss Lisle, your servant, and she said, Your Grace, and he went. Sir Edmund watched him out of the window. That is a quieter man than his father, Sir Edmund said, and a better one. Yes, Papa. You like him better than you did a week ago, I think. Papa. No, do not answer. I am not a fool, Margaret, I see what I see. He turned from the window. Help me up, I shall have my dinner in the dining room tonight. He had his dinner in the dining room. He ate more than he had eaten in a week. He asked Margaret to read to him from Cowper afterwards, and made her laugh twice, and slept that night without the laudanum the physician had left. Margaret lay in her own bed at midnight and thought, That is what I have bought. That is what the Duke and I have bought between us. My father is sleeping without laudanum because he believes I am marrying a man who refills his water glass without being asked. She thought, I do not know any longer whether I am angry with the Duke, or whether I am angry with myself for being less angry with him than I was a week ago. She slept badly. The Duke kept the bargain. He called in a fortnight. He brought a book Sir Edmund had mentioned the previous visit, that he had never read, Waverley, and the Duke had remembered, and the book was the new edition in calf, and Sir Edmund was delighted in the way only an old man is delighted by being remembered. The visit was half an hour. The Duke addressed perhaps 4 sentences directly to Margaret across the whole of it. Each sentence was a sentence of perfect formal courtesy, and each contained no second meaning whatsoever, and Margaret understood that he was being scrupulous. He was offering her no opportunity to be misread. He was leaving every advance, every softening, entirely in her hands. She did not soften. She had not yet decided to soften. She showed him to the door at the end of the half hour, and they exchanged formal civilities on the step, and his carriage took him away, and Sir Edmund, watching from the morning-room window, said, He is a courteous man, Margaret, he does not press. No, Papa, he does not. That is a quality I value. Yes, Papa. Sir Edmund coughed. The cough was worse than it had been a fortnight ago. Margaret heard it without turning her head. She had been hearing it a great deal in the last week. The physician had been twice. The physician had said, the second time, with the small, careful look he used when he meant something he was not quite saying, that perhaps Margaret should not go far from the house. Margaret had not gone far from the house. Margaret had not gone any further than the village in 8 days. The Duke called for the 3rd time on a Tuesday at the end of November. It was raining. He came in with his hat in his hand and rain on his shoulders, and the moment Margaret saw his face in the hall, she knew he had something to say that was not part of the bargain. She showed him into the morning-room. Sir Edmund was upstairs. He had not come down since the previous Thursday, and the room was empty. Your Grace. Miss Lisle? He did not sit. He turned the hat in his hands. Forgive me, I have not come to call on your father today. I have come to ask whether I may speak with you alone for 10 minutes. If you would prefer that I leave, I shall leave." She looked at him. "You may have 10 minutes, Your Grace." "Thank you." She sat. He did not. He stood with his back to the window with the wet grey light behind him, and she could not see his face clearly. "I have been to my solicitor in London this week," he said, "and to my mother in Berkshire. I have placed certain papers before them, and I have asked for certain instruments to be drawn. I shall not trouble you with the particulars. The result is that by the spring the Wexley estate shall be in a condition no Wexley has seen for 9 years. She did not understand. She said after a moment, "Your Grace, please let me finish or I shall not finish." "Very well. You have not known this. Your father has not known this. No one has known it but my mother and my solicitor, and now, today, you. When my father died 8 years ago, he left behind him debts of his own contracting, not entailed on the estate, but charged upon every piece of property he was free to charge. I came into the title and into those debts together. I have spent 8 years arresting the worst of them. The arrangement your father made with mine, the betrothal, included a settlement of £40,000, of which the trust would have permitted a portion, by mutual agreement, to be directed to the discharge of certain of these obligations. I tell you the figure plainly. Of the 40, 10 was to come to me, 30 was to be settled upon you. I tell you also plainly that I needed the 10. That is the truth of what I should have been bringing to our wedding. That is what I have not told you, and have not told your father." Margaret was very still. "I tell you now," he said, "because I shall not have you marry me, if you ever marry me, which I do not assume, without knowing it, and because I shall not have you believe, when you hear it from someone else, that I was attempting to escape the consequence of it. I have written to my solicitor today. I have given up that 10,000. Whether you and I marry or do not marry, no portion of your father's settlement shall be paid to me. I have made it so on paper. I do not require it any longer. There is a piece of land in Norfolk that came to me from my mother's brother 3 years ago. It is not part of the Wexley entail. It is mine outright. It is worth, with the timber, something near the figure I needed. I am selling the timber this winter and the land in the spring. The principal debts shall be cleared by Michaelmas. My mother has approved every step. Crawford has been informed that the entailed property of Wexley shall come to him untouched, which is more than he had any right to expect." He stopped. He looked at her. "That is what I have been doing for 10 days, he said, "in London and in Berkshire. I tell you because you should know it. You should not have to ask me whether I came to you for your fortune. My father came to your father for your fortune. I did, at first, accept the arrangement on those terms. I shall not pretend otherwise. I am telling you now that I have ended that arrangement. The settlement, if ever there is a marriage between us, shall be settled wholly upon you, and the Wexley creditors shall be paid out of my own timber." Margaret did not speak. She could not have spoken if she had been required to. The Duke turned his hat once more in his hands. "I did not tell you this at Marlborough," he said, "because I did not wish you to believe my apology was offered as a preface to a confession of debt. I wished the apology to stand on what it was. I tell you today because the papers are in motion, and you have the right to know." He hesitated. "I shall go now." He moved toward the door. He had reached it when Margaret found her voice. "Your Grace." He stopped. "You said at Marlborough that you held me in the contrary of contempt." A pause. "I did." "You did not say what the contrary was." He turned. He looked at her across the room. The rain was loud against the window. "Miss Lyle, I do not believe I have earned the right to name it. I shall not buy that right with a confession about money. I shall wait, if you permit me to wait, until you have had time to know whether you wish to hear it named. I should rather be silent for 6 months, and have you believe my regard at the end of 6 months than speak today and have you doubt it ever afterwards." He bowed. He went. Margaret sat in the morning room for a long time after the carriage had gone down the drive. The fire in the grate burned low. Mrs. Hill came in at last and asked if she should bring tea, and Margaret heard herself answer, and Mrs. Hill went away again. She thought, "He has unmade the only reason I had to suspect him." She thought, "He has refused to use it as a reason for me to forgive him." She thought, "That is harder to forgive than the original sentence." She rose. She went up to her own room. She opened her dressing-table drawer and she took out the small leather box she had carried home in her travelling case, and she opened the box. The 2 pearls lay on their muslin exactly as he had said. They had not been touched. They had been removed from the dark walnut in his house and laid into their box, and the box had been handed to Bess by the Duke himself in the hallway of the house in Marlborough as they departed, with a note saying only, "For Miss Lyle, with my respects, W." Margaret rang for Bess. Bess came with her flat, sensible mouth and her quick hands, and threaded the gold wires through Margaret's ears with the small, careful tug Margaret had known since girlhood. Margaret looked at herself in the glass. The pearls hung steady. She had not worn them since the Sunday afternoon at Wexley Hall. She had not wanted to wear them, because they had become, in some way she had not entirely examined, the property of what she had heard through a half-open door, rather than the property of her mother or her father. She wore them now. She went down to her father's room, where she sat for an hour, and read him the second chapter of Waverley. Sir Edmund noticed. He noticed at once. He did not say anything for a long time. At the end of the chapter he said, very mildly, "You are wearing your mother's pearls, Margaret." "Yes, Papa." "You did not wear them when you came home." "No, Papa." "You are wearing them now." "Yes, Papa." He looked at her with the eyes that always saw too much. He did not press. He said only, "I am glad of it, my dear," and closed his eyes and slept. Margaret sat in the chair by the bed and watched her father sleep, and she did not take the pearls off that day or the next, or the day after. The first snow came on the 3rd of December. It came down in the afternoon, slow and dry, and by evening the south terrace was white, and the rooks were quiet in the elms. Sir Edmund asked to be brought down to the library to see it. Margaret and Bess between them managed the stairs. He sat in the great wing chair by the window with the rug over his knees, and looked out at the garden for a long time without speaking. "It is the last snow I shall watch," he said at last. He said it without drama, as he had said most things in his life. "I should like to watch it well." "Papa!" "Margaret, do not. I am an old man. I have a physician who is honest with me, and I have been honest with myself since August. We shall not be sentimental about it. We shall, however, talk." She sat down on the footstool beside his chair. "I have wished to talk with you for a fortnight," he said. "I have been waiting to be strong enough to do it well. I am as strong tonight as I shall be again. So we shall do it tonight." "Yes, Papa." He looked at her. He had her grey eyes, she had his. "How long has it been," he said, "since you and the Duke quarrelled?" She did not answer at once. "How did you know we had—" "My dear, I was once a young man engaged to a woman I had not earned. I know the look of a woman who is being civil to a man she has not forgiven. You wore it from the day you came home. You have worn it less this last fortnight, but you have worn it. What was it?" She looked at the carpet. "I overheard him say a cruel thing about me to his cousin, Papa, the day before I came home." "Ah," a long breath. "What did he say?" "That he tolerated me for your sake." Sir Edmund closed his eyes for a moment. He did not look surprised. He looked, she saw, only tired. And he has since explained it. He has, at Marlborough. The day after the letter came, I went to his aunt's house at Marlborough, and he was there. He told me he had said it to silence Mr. Crawford, who had been mocking the match. He offered no defence. He offered to write to you releasing me, in any terms I dictated. "And you did not let him?" "No." "Because of me?" "At first, yes. At first." Sir Edmund opened his eyes. "Margaret, tell me the rest." She told him the rest. She told him about the bargain, that the Duke would call every fortnight, that the engagement would stand in name only, that afterwards she should be free. She told him about the second visit, the book, the careful courtesy. She told him about the third visit in November, the rain and the confession about his father's debts and the Norfolk timber, and the Duke's refusal to use that confession to buy her forgiveness. She told him about putting on the pearls. She did not look at her father while she told it. She looked at the carpet mostly, and once at the window where the snow was still coming down. When she had finished, Sir Edmund was quiet for a long time. "Margaret," he said, "look at me." She looked. "I have something to tell you, and you shall not interrupt me until I have finished. Is that understood?" "Yes, Papa." "The Duke of Wexley came to me in July." She had not expected that. She did not speak. "He came to Lisle Court in July on a Wednesday afternoon, and he asked me for a private interview, and I gave it to him. We sat in this room. He told me that his late father had left behind him debts not entailed on the estate, but charged upon every piece of property he had been free to charge. He told me, without sparing himself, the precise figures. He told me that he had spent 8 years arresting them, and that he was, in his own words, within sight of a result that did not require me. He told me that, given the state of his affairs, he could not in honour ask my daughter to marry him under the terms his father had agreed with me, a settlement of £40,000, of which 10 was to be directed by mutual consent to the discharge of those personal obligations. Margaret said nothing. He asked my permission, Sir Edmund went on, to release you. He said you had given only half consent and that he would not have you bound to a contract that had been made for his rescue. He said it without bitterness. He said it as a man saying a thing he had thought carefully about and had decided was the only honourable thing to say. He came to release me in July. He came to release you in July. You did not let him. I did not let him. Sir Edmund's mouth moved in something very close to a smile. I am not proud of it, Margaret. I shall not pretend I am. I told him that I was dying. I told him that the only settled thing I had left in the world to do was to see you settled. I told him that you had agreed to the engagement and that I believed you were a woman who would not break it lightly. And I told him— Sir Edmund paused. I told him that if he could make himself a man you could love by Christmas, I should die a contented man, and that if he could not, he should write to me at Christmas and we should release you together, quietly, and no one should be the worse for it. Papa, wait. Papa, you cannot have— I said, wait, child. She waited. Her hand on her knee was perfectly still. He looked at me, Sir Edmund said, for a long time the way he looks, and he said, Sir Edmund, I shall not lie to you and tell you I love your daughter. I have spoken with her twice. I do not know her well enough to love her. I shall tell you this, I shall give her the chance to know me. I shall give her the chance to refuse me properly with all the facts before her. If by Christmas she has chosen against me, I shall release her in any terms you direct, and the obligation of our fathers shall be discharged. That is what he said to me in July. I did not tell you, Margaret, because I did not wish to influence you. I wished you to come into his house with your eyes clear and your mind your own. Margaret sat for a moment with her hands in her lap. He never told me, she said. He would not have. He gave me his word he would not. He gave me his word that whatever passed between you and him should pass without my hand on the scale. And what he said in the library about tolerating me was I should imagine the worst hour of his life. Margaret, the man wrote to me last week from London. He wrote me a letter that I have here. Sir Edmund put his hand inside his coat and drew out a folded sheet. I shall not read it to you. It is mine. I shall tell you only what is in it. He wrote to inform me that he had instructed his solicitor to refuse the 10,000 entirely, regardless of any future event between you and him. He wrote that he did not wish me to die believing him a man who had taken my daughter for her fortune. He wrote that he did not wish you, after my death, to wonder. He wrote that he should consider it the last service he could render me to make plain, on paper, that the whole of your settlement should be settled in trust on you and on no other person. He has signed instruments to that effect. He has placed copies with my own attorney. I have read them. Sir Edmund refolded the letter. He put it back inside his coat. That is the man, he said. You have been visiting in fortnightly civility for 2 months. That is the man you have not yet forgiven. I do not tell you to forgive him, Margaret. I have not the right. I tell you only because I love you, and because I shall not be here much longer to tell you anything. That you should not refuse him out of a wound you have already half healed. If you refuse him because you do not esteem him, not because of a sentence he spoke in October to silence a fool. Margaret looked at the fire. The fire was low. Mrs. Hill had not been in to mend it. Papa. Yes, my dear. Why did you wait until tonight to tell me? Sir Edmund smiled. It was a small, dry smile with great love in it. Because I have been waiting, he said, for you to put your mother's pearls back on. You put them on the day he told you about the Norfolk land. I noticed. I have noticed everything you have done since you came home. I thought you had taken the first step on your own, and that you should have a fortnight to consider whether you wished to take a second, and that if at the end of the fortnight you had not, I should make my speech. The fortnight ended on Sunday. Tonight is Tuesday. I have been a coward for 2 days. Papa, help me to bed, my dear. I am very tired. We shall speak more in the morning. She helped him to bed. She sat with him for an hour. He slept easily with his hand under his cheek the way he had slept since she was a child. She went to her own room. She did not sleep. In the morning Sir Edmund did not come down. The physician came at noon and stayed an hour and said with a small careful look that Sir Edmund might be himself again in 2 days, or might not. Margaret nodded and thanked him. She sat through the afternoon at her father's bedside, with Waverley open on her lap, reading aloud whenever he asked her to, and stopping whenever he closed his eyes. The snow had stopped in the night. The garden was white and still. At 4 o'clock Sir Edmund opened his eyes and said, Margaret. Yes, Papa. Send for him. For Wexley. Yes, today now. I should like to see him while I am clear. Yes, Papa. She wrote the note in the morning room. It was 3 lines. She gave it to the boy from the stables and told him to take the bay and ride to Wexley and put it directly into the Duke's hand by morning. She paid him a sovereign. He left at 4:30. The Duke arrived at Lisle Court at noon the following day on a horse that had been ridden hard. He came into the front hall in his travelling coat with the snow still on his boots, and his face when she came out to meet him in the hall was the face of a man who had not slept. "Miss Lisle, he is alive. He is asking for you." Thank God. She took him upstairs herself. At her father's door she stopped. "He has told me," she said, "about July, about the letter to him last week, about everything." The Duke looked at her. He did not say anything for a moment. "Did he said at last?" "On Tuesday evening." "I did not, Miss Lisle. I did not ask him to tell you." "I know." She opened the door. She went in first. Sir Edmund was propped up against his pillows. He looked very small in the great bed, and very calm. "Wexley, you came quickly." "Sir Edmund." "Sit down, man, there. Margaret, give us a quarter of an hour. Sit in the dressing-room. I do not want you on the landing." "Yes, Papa." She went into the dressing-room. She sat on the small chair by the window. She did not try to overhear. She had overheard one conversation in her life through a door, and she had had enough of doors. She heard faintly her father's voice, and at one point the Duke's low and steady. She did not hear the words. She heard once her father laugh, a short, surprised laugh, the laugh of a man who had been told something amusing. And after that she heard her own breathing in the small room, and the small ticking of the clock on the mantel, and at last she heard the bedroom door open and the Duke's footstep on the floor. He looked in at her in the dressing-room. "He is asleep. He asked me to tell you not to come up to him until evening. He said you were to walk with me in the garden." My father said that. My father-in-law, in his words, said that. Margaret did not move from the chair. "He has not been your father-in-law for 2 months, Your Grace." "No, he has not. He has, however, this afternoon declared himself one in advance of the fact. He said I was to take you out of the house and into the cold air, and that if I came back with a face that did not satisfy him, I should not be welcome at Lisle Court again. I am not in a position to argue with him." She almost smiled. "Walk with me," he said. "Please, half an hour. It is bright. The paths will be dry by the south wall." She put on her cloak. She wore the pearls. They went out by the garden door. The south terrace at Lisle Court ran the length of the morning room and the library, and ended in a stone bench under a beech tree at the far corner. The snow had melted from the flagstones in the sun. The grass beyond was still white. The air was cold and bright and very still. They walked the first 100 yards in silence. The Duke had offered his arm. She had taken it. She had not taken his arm before. It was, she discovered, narrower than she had expected, and steadier than she had expected, and she did not know whether her hand on his sleeve was trembling because of the cold, or because of the fact of her hand on his sleeve. He spoke first. "Miss Lisle, I shall not pretend to misunderstand your father's intentions today. I shall, however, give you my word that I have not asked him to make them on my behalf. He has been making them entirely on his own." "I know." "I am uncertain how to proceed." "As am I." He looked sideways at her. He almost smiled. It was the first time she had seen him almost smile. Then perhaps, he said, "we should proceed slowly." "Yes." They walked another 50 yards. The Duke cleared his throat. "I should like to say a thing," he said, "if you will allow it." "You may." "At Marlborough in October, I told you that I had held you in the contrary of contempt, and that I had no right to name what the contrary was. You asked me. I declined. I declined because I believed, and I still believe, that I had not earned the right to use the word that came into my mouth. I do not yet know whether I have earned it. I propose that I tell you the word, and that you decide whether I have earned it." "Very well." The word was esteem. The deeper word behind it was one I should not pronounce aloud until you have given me leave. She did not stop walking. She found that she had stopped walking. He stopped a step later and turned, and the path was narrow, and they were standing very near each other in the cold. "Your Grace." "I shall not press it on you, Miss Lisle. I am telling you only that what I felt for you when I sat across from your father in July, and what I felt when I stood in your empty chamber at Wexley in October, and what I have felt at every visit since, has not been named because I have not earned the right to name it. I have not used the deeper word. I do not use it now to ask anything of you. I use it, I refer to it, because you asked me in October what the contrary of contempt was, and I owe you the answer. The contrary is esteem. Beyond esteem there is a further word. I shall not speak it without your permission. You owe me the answer. Yes. She looked away from him. She looked at the white grass. Her hand was still on his sleeve. You said in October that if you spoke today, you should never afterwards be believed. I said that. I was wrong. I was wrong because your father has spoken to you in the interval and saved me from a silence I should not have kept much longer. I do not now have the burden of being believed against the evidence of money. The settlement is gone. The debt is being settled out of my own land. I have nothing to offer you that is not myself. Yourself? Such as I am, yes. Your Grace, you are very fond of inverting your sentences. I shall stop. Please do. He laughed. It was a short, startled laugh, very much like her father's the day before, and it was the first time she had heard him laugh, and she discovered that she liked it. Miss Lyle. She looked at him. I am sorry. She did not speak. I am sorry I said what I said. I am sorry I said it in my own house with a door I had ceased to think about for 15 years. I am sorry I said it of a woman who had been 3 days under my roof and to whom I had not spoken 20 civil sentences. I am sorry for what it cost you. I am sorry for what it cost your father. I am sorry that I am only now, 2 months after the fact, capable of saying these sentences without the small caveats I have been using to make them tolerable to myself. I do not ask you to forgive me today. I ask you to believe that I shall regret that sentence for the rest of my life, and that I shall, if you let me, spend the rest of my life giving you no occasion to recall it. She found that she had to look away from him. She looked at the beech tree at the end of the terrace. You are asking my forgiveness. I am asking your total forgiveness. And if I cannot give it today, then I shall wait. And if I cannot give it at all. He was silent for a moment. Then I shall live with that, Miss Lyle, and I shall be a better man for having known you, and I shall not trouble you again. She did not for a long moment trust herself to speak. The wind moved in the beech tree. A small flake of old snow fell from a branch onto the path between them. You have not used my Christian name, she said. No. I noticed. I had hoped you would notice. You have not used it because I have not been given it, yes. She drew a breath. I forgive you, she said. He did not move. I forgive you, she said again, not because my father has told me anything, and not because you have unmade the debts, and not because you came in November and told me the truth without asking me to thank you for it. I forgive you because I have watched you for 2 months, and you have not, in any of those 2 months, asked me to forgive you. You waited until I could give it freely. I am giving it freely. He bowed his head. He said nothing for a moment. When he raised his eyes again, she saw that he had not trusted himself to speak at once. Miss Lyle. Yes. May I, at the proper moment, at the moment that is proper to it, may I have leave to address you by your Christian name? You may have leave, she said, on our wedding day, not before. That is more than I had expected to be granted today. It is what I find myself willing to grant. I shall not extend it tonight. I'm not yet ready to be Margaret to you. I shall be ready on the morning of the wedding. I shall not be ready before. Then I shall not ask before. She looked up at him. He had not moved. His hand had come at some point in the last minute to cover hers on his sleeve. She had not noticed when. He took it away now, very carefully, as if it had been there without his consent. Forgive me, he said. I should not have... Wexley. Yes. Do not begin to be careful now. He looked at her. He did not smile. His face was very grave. I shall do my best. He bent his head, only a little, and she did not retreat, and the kiss when it came was brief and careful and entirely unhesitating, like the closing of a door that had been standing open for a long time. When he stepped back, she was still holding the front of his coat with one hand, which she had not been aware of taking hold of. She let go of it. They stood there for another moment under the beech, and then she put her hand back inside his arm, and they walked the length of the terrace back toward the house. They did not speak. They did not need to. At the garden door she stopped. My father will wish to see you again before you go. I shall stay tonight at the inn. I shall come tomorrow. Oh, you shall stay here. We have rooms. He will wish to see you in the morning. Miss Lyle. I am not asking your grace. I am informing you. He bowed his head. He was almost smiling again. Yes, ma'am. The Duke stayed at Lisle Court that night. Mrs. Hill, who had served the house for 30 years and was not easily astonished, put him in the south guest room without comment and brought up hot water without remark. and in the morning at breakfast she set his coffee at the place that had always been intended for the master of the house, the place at Margaret's left, and did not look at either of them while she did it. Sir Edmund was carried down to the morning room at 11. He was a paler man than he had been the day before, but his eyes were perfectly clear. He looked at the Duke, he looked at his daughter, he looked, with great satisfaction, at the pearl earrings. "Well," he said. "Sir Edmund," said the Duke. "Margaret." "Papa." "Well, I take it I shall not have to be a coward a third time." "No, Papa." "And the wedding. Shall we have it before Christmas, or shall we have it after?" Margaret looked at the Duke. The Duke looked at her father. "Sir Edmund, that is a question for your daughter." "My daughter is going to say before Christmas, Wexley, because she is not a fool." "Papa." "Margaret, I should like to give you away. I should like to do it sitting down with a stick in a small church with no fuss. I should like to do it this month. Will you do me that kindness?" She crossed to him. She knelt down by his chair. She took his hand. His hand was cold. "Yes, Papa." "Wexley." "Sir." "Get the license." "Yes, sir." "Today." "Yes, sir." "Margaret." "Yes, Papa." "Pour me a small brandy, my dear. We are having a celebration. Mrs. Hill will pretend not to notice." She poured him a small brandy. Mrs. Hill, coming in with the second pot of coffee, pretended not to notice. The Duke rode to London on Thursday morning and came back on Saturday evening with a special license in his pocket. He had not slept on either night of the journey. He had ridden post, changed horses 6 times, and presented himself in person at Doctors' Commons, and he had paid what was necessary to have the license drawn up and signed by the Archbishop's surrogate within 36 hours. He arrived at Lisle Court at 9 on Saturday with mud on him to the knee and a paper folded against his heart, and Margaret, meeting him in the hall, said only, "Have you eaten?" "No." "Eat, then go and see my father. Then sleep." "Yes, ma'am." The wedding was set for the following Wednesday, the 11th of December at 11 in the morning, at the small parish church at Lisle Magna, the village church Margaret had been baptized in, where her mother was buried, and where the rector had known her since she was 4. There were no announcements, there were no cards. The Dowager Duchess was sent for from Berkshire, and arrived on Monday in a closed carriage with a single maid, and embraced Margaret in the hall without saying anything, which Margaret understood to be a great compliment. Mr. Crawford was not sent for. He learned of the wedding from the Morning Post, a fortnight after the fact, and is said to have broken a small piece of furniture. This is hearsay, but the housekeeper at Wexley afterwards confirmed the bill for the chair. On Tuesday afternoon, Margaret went up to her father's room with the small leather box in her hand. "Papa." "Margaret." "I should like to wear Mamma's pearls tomorrow." "I should like you to." "And I should like—" She hesitated. "I should like you to be the one to put them in the morning before we go down." Sir Edmund looked at her. His eyes were very bright. "I should like that very much, my dear." In the morning, Sir Edmund's man helped him dress, and then Margaret came in her plainest pale blue with her hair already pinned, and she sat down on the low stool by her father's chair. He opened the box. He took out the left pearl first. His hands shook a little, but the gold wire was old and familiar to him. He had handled these pearls before, when he had given them to her mother on the morning of his own wedding 32 years before. He guided the wire through her ear with the small, careful tug she knew. He took out the right. He fastened it. "There," he said. "There, yes, there she is." "Papa." "Your mother wore those to my wedding. I told you that the day you went to Wexley." "I remember. I should have told you the rest that day." "What was the rest, Papa?" Sir Edmund smiled. It was his old dry smile made small by the thinness of his face. "That she did not love me yet on our wedding day. She had agreed to the match for her father's sake. She had agreed because he had wished it, and because she had been raised to oblige him. I knew it. I married her anyway. I married her on the understanding that I should make her love me, or fail in the attempt, and that either way I should be a better man for trying. She loved me by Easter. She told me so on Easter Sunday in the garden. I have remembered it every Easter Sunday of my life since." "Papa." "That is what I should have told you, Margaret, the day you went. I did not tell you because I was afraid you should refuse to go if you knew it had once happened that way to me. I have been a coward about a number of things this autumn." She put her hand over his. "You have not been a coward about anything, Papa." "I have, but I have been forgiven, I think." "You have. Then go and be married, my dear. I shall come down in a moment. Give me your arm at the door of the church. I shall manage the rest with my stick." She kissed his forehead. Yes, Papa. The wedding was small. There were 11 people in the church. The rector, who had baptized her, read the service in a voice that broke once at the line about for better, for worse, which he had read at her mother's wedding 32 years before, and which he had read at her mother's funeral when Margaret was 11. He did not break a second time. Sir Edmund walked Margaret to the chancel step. He did it slowly. He used his stick in his right hand and her arm in his left. He did not, in the event, sit down at all during the service. He stood. He gave her away. He spoke the words, "her father," in a voice that was not loud but was perfectly clear, and he placed her hand in the Duke's hand without trembling. The Duke said his vows in the same voice he had used in the morning room in November, level, careful, every word weighed. He did not say them as though he had rehearsed them. He said them as though he had thought about them for 2 months and had only now permitted himself to speak them aloud. Margaret said hers in the voice of a woman who had decided. The rector pronounced them married. The Duke turned to his wife and bent his head, and before he kissed her, chastely with the rector 6 feet away, and the dowager in the front pew, and a December light coming through the east window onto the stone floor, he said her name. He said it quietly. He said only the one word. Margaret. Henry. It was the first time. She had been waiting to say it for a week. She had not known until she said it how it would sound in her own mouth. He kissed her. Sir Edmund, who had remained standing all this time, sat down very heavily on the front pew with a small sigh and said audibly, "Thank God. Now we may have luncheon." There was a laugh. It travelled through the small church and came out the door with them. Sir Edmund lived until the 2nd week of March. He did not die of the cough in the end. He died in his sleep in the great bed at Lisle Court, with his daughter beside him and his old terrier on his foot, on a Wednesday morning when the daffodils had just come up under the south wall. He had been at Wexley Hall for Christmas, and at Lisle for January, and at Wexley again for a week in February. He had walked his daughter into the long gallery at Wexley on 12th night and said, "It is a handsome house, Margaret. You shall make something of it." She had said, "Yes, Papa." He had said, "I am content." He was buried at Lisle Magna beside his wife. The Duke stood beside Margaret at the grave, and did not let go of her hand for the duration of the service, which the rector remarked on afterwards to his own wife, who remarked that the new Duchess of Wexley, who was wearing her mother's pearls under her veil, had not wept until the moment the first earth was put down, and that her husband had put his other hand over hers at that moment and not removed it. It was the rector's wife who first observed to her sister, in a letter that summer, that the new Duke and Duchess were the quietest, happy people she had ever seen in a pew. In May they were at Wexley. The house had been opened up for the first time in 8 years. The long gallery had been aired. The south rooms, which had been shut since the late Duke's death, had been swept, and the dust sheets folded and put away. The Norfolk timber had been sold in January, the Norfolk land in April. The principal of the debt was discharged by midsummer. The remainder, a small obligation in Northumberland that Henry had no particular feeling about, was settled the following spring with money he had earned in the interval by farming his own land better than his father had farmed it. Crawford did not come to Wexley that year or the next. He had taken Margaret's note coolly in print and worse in private. He sent a card at Christmas. The Duke sent one back. The Duchess wrote in her own hand 3 lines at the bottom of her husband's note. "Mr. Crawford, you are always welcome at Wexley Hall on the understanding that all doors between the library and the music room are to be left fully open or fully closed. M. Wexley." It was the only sentence she ever wrote about the matter to anyone, and Crawford, who was not a brave man but was not without a sense of humour, kept the card and showed it to no one, and did not visit Wexley until the christening of their first child 18 months later, where he behaved perfectly and was forgiven. On a Sunday afternoon in October, a year almost to the day after she had walked across the music room at Wexley Hall and heard her name through a half-open door, Margaret was sitting in the library at Wexley, in the chair by the fire, with a book in her lap she was not reading. The connecting door to the music room stood fully open. The afternoon was bright. Her husband came in. "Margaret." "Henry, I have something for you." "What is it?" He held out his hand. In his palm lay a small object. It was a key, a small brass key with a black silk thread tied through the ring. "It is the key to the music room door," he said. "Mrs. Pine found it last week in my father's desk. It had not been used in 20 years. The door has not been locked in 20 years. She looked at the key. She looked at him. "What am I to do with it?" "Whatever you like. You may keep it. You may throw it in the fire. You may lock the door tonight with me inside the room and refuse to let me out until I have apologized for every cruel sentence I have ever spoken or shall ever speak in the future. I leave the matter entirely to you." She did not laugh quite. She held out her hand. He put the key into it. "I shall keep it," she said. "I shall keep it on my dressing table at Wexley in the drawer where I keep my mother's pearls. It will remind me to close doors properly." "I have been closing doors properly for a year." "You have. I shall keep the key, all the same." He bent and kissed her briefly, the way he had kissed her under the beech tree at Lisle. "Margaret." "Yes." "Are you happy?" She looked up at him. She thought about it. She thought about a Sunday afternoon a year ago, a door behind a bookcase, a dawn departure, a journey home, an aunt's parlour at Marlborough, a confession about debt, a snowfall in December, a hand on a glass of water, her father's hand at the chancel step, an open grave in March, her mother's pearls under a veil, a single word spoken at the altar before a kiss. "Yes," she said, "I'm happy. I should like to remain so." "I should like that as well." He sat down in the chair beside her. The fire burned low and was not mended. The library door, which had been open when he came in, stayed open. The music room door, which had also been open, stayed open. Neither of them got up to close anything.